This is the market update, another down-only day, but I will tell you why. Why is the market down-only still? And what risks do that pose? And when does it end? It's getting a little bit predictable with the FUD. The Bitcoin FUD is fake. We'll talk about it. I think the Solana FUD may be under-discussed. We'll talk about that. Mostly, I want to continue to instill your faith in alternative assets and crypto, ironically, mainly by talking about silver. Yes, I have a silver video on TikTok that has 10 times the amount of views as anything I've done on crypto lately, since why is crypto down on the move to 80? So what does down only in Bitcoin, deep concern over altcoins, and silver up only mean? We'll discuss that. Now, if you want to get all this information and get even more research like 2026 previews, you want to subscribe to the channel. You want to check out the YouTube member area where we have an outstanding top 10 surprises for 2026. And don't forget all the tactical and thought leadership work in Patreon. And if none of that works for you, please hit the like button. That helps us help you. Now, Bitcoin down only. Why? Why can't it rally? Okay, well, let's talk about three groups of people. Let's talk about Bitcoin miners. Yesterday, we mentioned that cold weather in Texas changed their profitability. So that may have either created selling by smaller miners or weakened the network. Then, of course, as if we needed any more FUD, 2 or 3 articles popped up about the Russians banning mining in strategic locations where they allegedly need the energy for defense. Conveniently released at the same time that the Chinese decided to crack down on miners that are operating illegally in the country, right? In other words, you know, if the emperor doesn't see us, we're not here. That's not exactly the proverb. But isn't it funny how the Chinese and the Russians both sent out or both put out PR about how they were shutting down Bitcoin mining? Because after all, what we need is more FUD, right? Wrong. Now, what's that about? All right, well, let's think about it. Chinese and the Russians, after, 25 years of buying gold nonstop, the trade's working out. But I don't know if a gold-backed Russian or Chinese currency is going to be perceived as better than a digital stablecoin dollar. Matter of fact, I'm sure it definitely won't be, no matter how much gold they have. Now, if you want to stop stablecoins, or if you just want to put egg on the face of the U.S. administration, what would you do? Well, you would push Bitcoin lower. You would artificially suppress it, sell it. Chinese could be liquidating captured Bitcoin or seized Bitcoin to keep local governments afloat. Like that's a real thing. They're just carrying on. Why? Well, because stablecoin companies, what assets do they hold as reserves? They hold treasuries, they hold Bitcoin, and Tether's got gold. But Bitcoin is a big asset held by stablecoin companies. So if you're against stablecoins, you lean on Bitcoin. It's obviously not the same thing, but, like when Luna broke back in 2022, it was the value of the Bitcoin collateral that when that shattered, that's helped the Luna cascade get going. Bitcoin is an important component of stablecoins because it's a reserve asset. Now, naturally, it has to hold up. And of course, the Russians and Chinese don't want it to hold up. So that's why you've got this just persistent selling. No sponsorship for altcoins and someone sitting on Bitcoin. Now, the good news is that I think Michael Saylor is wise to how this is working and when it ends. In other words, he's been very active, right? He's been buying Bitcoin in billion-dollar chunks down here, okay? Very aggressively. I have a feeling that he's being informed that whoever is selling, whether it's miners or a liquidated market maker or, this Chinese and Russian FUD has, sell pressure behind it. I have a feeling he sees that as finite. And I agree, right? Like the Chinese can ban mining. They did it. They took down 50% of the hash rate. Bitcoin survived. Whatever the Chinese and the Russians are doing now is a fraction of the sort of mining power they tried to take offline the last time they did this. And I'm just getting news now from the Eagle King that the Chinese may be selling Bitcoin for legitimate reasons because their property market is imploding again. I mean, their property market has been going to zero for 5 or 6 years now. It's just this slow rolling thing. Local governments are very invested in property, skyscrapers, commercial real estate. So they may be selling Bitcoin to plug a hole in their balance sheet. And again, these guys only have so much crypto, and that eventually ends, even if they do the unfortunate, which is create a year-end tax loss selling panic or a reverse Santa rally. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that this year. Some of the work that we got Patreon early, essentially said that, if it holds 85, it's fine. But if it's hanging around 82, then, you have more danger of some kind of final flush. But remember, the orange man is going to pardon these guys on the privacy side from the Samourai wallet. They have to get stablecoins going. They have to do $9 trillion in debt issuance next year. Covered this on a stream with Crypto Princess yesterday. They have to figure out who is going to buy $9 trillion of Uncle Sugar's bonds next year. They got to get some of those bonds into stablecoin companies. And that means, you got to have stablecoins next year at 2 to 3 trillion. Huge. I mean, that right now, that's the market cap of all of crypto, 2 to 3 trillion. So stablecoins has to be as big as crypto by this time next year or earlier, which means pardons, favorable legislation, and expediting stablecoins, hence the JP Morgan launch of a money market mutual fund on ETH. They have to do the stablecoins. And the Russians and Chinese know it. And I'm sure you're overjoyed to wake up and find out that your bag is in the middle of a Tom Clancy movie. Okay, my attitude on that is don't fade America when America is determined and has to do something. Like the Normandy landing and the moon landing, assuming the moon landing was true. Assuming all that, when America wants to do it and America has to do it, America usually does it. Right now, again, your bag. Let's talk about like what could possibly be hurting your bag. Solana is definitely an under-discussed topic. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the end of the meme coin world. It ended with, Trump selling over the top of everybody's head. Really hoping that would actually usher memes into a world of money. And instead, it was the absolute end. Now, it is so the end that Solana, the founders, are being sued along with the people running Pump.fun, okay, over essentially a conspiracy to use Pump.fun to defraud people, to have, preferred people getting issuance of coins that would be pumped and then dumped. It's so not funny. what could happen. Now, there's like a 40 to 60% chance it winds up kind of a nothing burger, the lawsuit, but that kind of makes Solana a nothing burger, meaning, Solana is going to need to completely reinvent itself. That seems like the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is if, effectively the Solana Foundation and the Solana founders can't defend themselves or wind up losing, then all of the Solana that the Solana Foundation and related treasury companies hold could get frozen or liquidated or confiscated for a judgment. Can you imagine what that does to the price of Solana? I mean, in some ways, it feels like I'm back in 2022 again, right? Like a mining problem with Bitcoin and then something wrong with Solana. Now, again, Solana was the collateral of choice for FTX, which is why Solana got destroyed from 200 to 20. But I'm sort of wondering, as I watch altcoins literally do nothing, like the only altcoin that has a bid is Monero, the privacy coin. And even though Zcash fluctuates 2 to 3%, at least it's holding between 300 and 400 and not completely falling out of bed. But everything else is melting. And it could be this simple. If Solana is no good, then is everything below Solana on the market cap chart no good? I mean, I can't believe I'm saying that, but I mean, somebody explain to me why XRP is below $2. Yeah, there's an XRP ETF. Yes, there's ETF overhang. People are selling the ETF at the end of the year. You have tax loss selling of the Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. I know, right? That probably also hurts price. But again, most of that is probably going to be done right after Christmas, right? I mean, it's like 8 days away, pretty much. And if anything, Bitcoin represents a buy relative to what's going on in equities, which to me, in many ways, seems more crazy every day when you think about the valuations and you think about the money that they're going to have to spend on the AI data center build out. And when do they actually start earning that money back? They will eventually, but is it going to be next quarter, next 2 quarters, next year? It may not be next year. So yeah, crypto's taking it on the chin. There are all these reasons. You've heard all about it. But when we have to resort to like Russia and China FUD, I don't know. That's when the case for lower Bitcoin to me gets kind of weak. I think this thing about Solana is so weird. Nobody really knows what to do with it. But in some ways, it explains why Solana never managed to get above 180. Anybody who watches the show knows that even when the market was going up, I was like, wow, Solana goes to 220 and then it goes back to 120, right? And it just cannot close above 180. Now you know why. I mean, not to spend too much time on the FUD, but, if you have a real lawsuit and you have a 20% chance, because that's what like the model I put it through says, you have a 20% chance or 15% chance of a very negative outcome. That's not a very high probability, but that doesn't mean it's non-existent. And you could also turn Solana into like a zombie network. If like who's going to build stable coins on Solana when people start going through the details of that lawsuit? I don't know who's got a better case. I do know that, Pump.fun was notorious. And as with all manias, like the .com IPOs, like the NFTs, and when you get those major manias, somebody inevitably blows up and then somebody inevitably sues. This is old as the hill, but it does represent altcoin overhang, at least when it comes to Solana. Now, I would think that if we could think about this rationally and there was an up market, that if there was a problem with Solana, that obviously this would be a huge boost to ETH, right? Because all these Wall Street houses for the stablecoins are going to build on ETH. And I don't know if there are other layer ones like Sui or Monad that are going to exponentially benefit from any type of Solana problem. I don't know that anyone's thinking about it that way at the moment. Like, in other words, wow, we can think about Solana FUD, but hey, should we be looking at some of this other stuff? Maybe even XRP to run stable coins. I mean, all you have right now is fear, uncertainty, and doubt because, you know, the price action is down only. When they sit on Bitcoin, and if nobody wants the Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF, or Bitcoin activity slows down the same way Solana activity has slowed down, right? It's almost like, you know, we're at the end. We're not at the end of a bull market. We're at the end of winter. It's been winter all year, except for a couple of pumps in Bitcoin. Now let's go to precious metals. Let's go to how this all turns around. So we want to welcome everybody that's coming in from TikTok and on YouTube. We want to remind you to smash the like button, give us some love so we can continue to help you and keep the lights on throughout this total nightmare. Total nightmare. Okay, some perspectives on silver. So I do a silver video for TikTok, the silver black swan. I had it floating around in the algorithm 2 days ago, and all of a sudden, when silver hit 65, the little video took off as everyone is all of a sudden now interested in silver. The problem in silver is very simple. There isn't enough silver to deliver to anybody who holds paper silver, like a futures contract, period. And you have big banks who, I don't know, for whatever reason, act as short sellers or suppressors of precious metals, and they're all short. Supposedly, Bank of America is out this morning. You know, they're short at 25 to 30, again, according to Twitter. The move to $65 was allegedly some kind of gigantic margin call, right? Somebody got liquidated. Some short seller got liquidated in silver. And there is absolutely no question, if you look into the plumbing of the silver market, as this guy Just Dario does, that there may not be enough physical silver to deliver to people who are adamantly demanding delivery based on the piece of paper that they're holding. And of course, that would be a nightmare for both the exchange, because the exchange could blow up. And you could also have a problem with banks because, you know, in between the guy with the paper silver and the guy with the actual silver is a bank. Like, there are clearing banks is what they're called. So if there's a default, if somebody can't get what they're entitled to, that has implications for banks. Now, you're probably wondering, Bill, why is that good? Well, with silver at 65, we need to talk about why it's good. Because silver could, according to this one guy, and I think he's right, silver, if it gets out of hand, can act like GameStop, where you can just have wild action up to 100. Now, the reason we would love that is because, you know, when GameStop took off, you had an altcoin revival right after that. When you had the original, you know, Roaring Kitty, God, the Roaring Kitty move in GameStop up to like $90 a share. You could have the same thing happen in silver. And frankly, I wouldn't discount that gold goes with silver this time, that there's a shock move up in gold. Of course, anything that would get crypto going would be preferred, right? Anything that gets speculative juices going would be welcome, particularly if it was a wild speculative squeeze. Now, the counter argument, which I got from a guy who I've been talking to about precious metals for like 6 years, you know, we were way too early on gold and real world assets for both gold and water. We'll be back on water. But, you know, he was like, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission will not allow silver to blow up banks. Will not allow silver to blow up banks. Okay. Well, they're not doing a very good job right now, but that doesn't mean if silver starts to get out of hand that they can somehow change the rules, change margin requirements, or do whatever it is they have to do to keep silver from going to 100 and having banks blow up. Now, again, for us crypto heads, having problems with a bank because of short selling just brings the Fed in harder. And to be completely honest, I think if the CFTC, the commodities regulator in America, has to do something to stop the up move in silver, it will be because it's a problem for a bank. So whether a bank actually has a problem or some government agency has to act to prevent a problem with a bank, it brings in the Fed, or it brings in Bessent, it brings in somebody. They cannot just sit here and wait for another Silicon Valley bank, another contagion, or another chain reaction, not 2 days, not 2 days before the Bank of Japan happens. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like there are all these problems. Like everyone was like Bank of Japan obsessed. They still are. I think they should be looking at the employment data and silver, because that's the real propellant for crypto. Like all the bears have left on the downside is, oh, well, you know, Russians and Chinese are selling Bitcoin. Okay. Power prices went up in Texas, so that hurt Bitcoin miners. Oh, okay. This is a reason to dump what could be, you know, a reserve currency in the future? God, I don't think so, man. I really don't. You know, and I know that there are downside scenarios, and I know that there are bears getting all hyped up about this thing completely falling apart. You don't know if people are going to panic for tax loss selling, but I'm going to be honest with you. I know this sounds crazy, but the market is actually making me less and less upset the more I learn or try to learn about why things are as they are. Right? In other words, this whole down move, frankly, is just BS. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin as a foreign exchange instrument. Bitcoin is literally being picked on in a way, right? The ETFs didn't perform relative to stonks, so people dumped the ETFs, right? You know, retail gets caught in altcoins, they heave it out. Long-term hodlers, you know, who don't think it's going up or they became billionaires, they get exit liquidity from Michael Saylor and treasury companies and they sell. Right? This just doesn't feel like a massive top. It just feels like reaccumulation by other people. So even though my P&L is terrible and yeah, you know, watching it go down 2 to 3% a day is awful, I'm getting less upset. For example, why is XRP below $2? Well, to be honest with you, Solana is probably dragging down XRP, and this Solana situation, which is completely under-discussed and under-reported because everybody is deer in the headlights on it. Everyone's looking at it and goes, what? The Solana Foundation, the Solana founders are getting sued? I mean, that is probably affecting the bid for everything below Solana on the market cap chart, which, you know, I'm not happy about because you know what? Zcash has not traded the same since the Solana lawsuit, right? Zcash stopped at 4. Zcash looked like it was going to 700, and it still might if 85K Bitcoin holds. If you don't get that final like 80, 82, 78 thing, hey, I'm not giving up on Zcash by any stretch of the imagination. But clearly that Solana lawsuit changed altcoins because they've done nothing but bleed out since. And again, that includes Zcash. So everybody on the market cap chart is most likely being affected by this Solana thing. Now, just like 2022, ironically, you know, that was the last time you had a Bitcoin mining problem similar to what you have now, ironically, right? Where they had to actually make it easier for miners to make money. We discussed that yesterday. And then, of course, there's a Solana problem. I'm like, wow, this is really starting to look familiar. Right. And you have this like panic bid in safe haven assets, which, in a way, crypto should participate in. And, based on some of the work that we're doing for 2026 and the top surprises for next year, and oh my God, this thing that just rolled off the press, you can have much higher than you think late December, early January, and then you can have get to the chopper in February. And I think everyone is like, get to the chopper now. And I think that's early because, at the end of the day, whatever happens next year, that, I don't know, changes the world, because that is going to happen. Like, something is going to happen next year that's going to be epic. We're working on it right now. We're like, this is like Top Surprises Part 2 or Top Surprises X Games Extreme Edition. Bitcoin will be something the world needs and uses. And it'd be really interesting if that happened right after they got done smacking crypto, whether that's now or in February or both. In other words, everything you ever wanted from crypto, about crypto, and about how the world approaches and uses crypto is probably about to come to the surface. I mean, think about it. Bitcoin is 17 years old as of next year. If I told you that you were within 2 months or 3 months of a major opportunity to have this thing take off, and after they shake everyone out, essentially go straight up, right, in very volatile moves, like, way down, way up, way down, way back up again. I mean, that's 2026 in a nutshell. But of course, that kind of volatility is great for swing trading. And that type of volatility is great if you can get the dips and hang on. 80, 85, that could be one of those kind of at least historic dips for the moment. I don't know what's going to happen in February of next year, but I'm sure you can sit around and look at the tape, and you can look at silver, and you can look at gold and go, you know what? Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. Something's going to break. I mean, again, why did the Fed start $45 billion in QE? Talking to Crypto Princess yesterday. In October, there was supposed to be no rate cuts, and they were supposed to have QE wasn't even a conversation. It was more like, when are they going to stop tightening? They went from tightening to QE in one day, and they cut rates, and no one talked about it because everybody was obsessed with the grinding price action lower and fear over the Bank of Japan. If the last miner or the last guy from China or the last guy from Russia or the last Bitcoin miner sells, and this Bank of Japan news either winds up a nothing burger or nothing more than a one-day blip that's already priced in, dare I say it, but, you might actually see Santa. You might. I mean, I don't know what the low is. I would be very happy if the low was like 84, 85, and we didn't have to deal with any of that 80, 82 stuff. But if this Bank of Japan thing is like a one and done trade, and all these other characters are sold out, and to be honest, all these altcoins that have been impacted by Solana that have nothing to do with Solana could go up a lot. In other words, I keep thinking about, like, I ran through this lawsuit thing with a chatbot, and I got done, and I was like thinking about Raoul Paul and Sui at $1.50, and just absolutely no bid, none. That's the Sui, that's the Solana alternative that, Raoul Paul is in love with. So I'm like, once the Bank of Japan is over with, doesn't all that deserve a look? In other words, if you get the silver thing going crazy, banks under fire, the Bank of Japan thing out of the way, the Fed coming in heavy with QE, and they've FUDed Bitcoin until they just can't FUD it anymore. Somebody on Twitter said this. What does Michael Saylor know? Why has Michael Saylor all of a sudden run in and bought $2 billion worth of Bitcoin? Not to go into the math, but really based on what MicroStrategy stock is doing, the guy should kind of hold off on Bitcoin. He would actually be better off if he held off. But you know what? He doesn't care. I think the reason for that is, he smells large amounts of liquidity coming in from forced sellers. So he doesn't have to wait until it goes up 30% before he can buy $2 billion. He's going to get $2 billion now. Now, of course, the alternative explanation is that, the guy's losing his mind and he's coming unglued and we're getting close to his average price, blah, 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 blah. I'm really not buying into that type of FUD, although I'm not exactly happy with who's running his Twitter account. Then again, they are getting attention because you can't post the same bullish meme every day. Just that when he posts a stupid meme, Bitcoin goes straight down. I know we've talked about that already. But that guy is active in here buying billions for a reason. And I think it's because, over-the-counter dealers who have got whatever sales from miners in China and the Russians, that's why there's all this selling overnight and on weekends. That's just our enemy. He's just putting pressure on it. And he's like, oh my God, if this kind of liquidity is available, I'm taking it. And of course, nobody can see anything except fear of the Bank of Japan and red ink today. But that could change. Like the FUD turns into bullish propellant if the FUD doesn't crack the market. And I also think, as a concluding line before we welcome who's here, that asset allocation, right? Like nobody in equities owns Bitcoin. Everyone is like, oh my God, it's down. But I mean, that should encourage asset allocation, right? Because, you're not really having any fun in Oracle stock right now. Or frankly, in many of these Magnificent Seven stocks, I mean, the big idea in equities is, so I'm told, is like consumer staples. Nicotine, gum, candy, that's their big trade for next year. I'm like, whoa, wow. Exciting, right? You boys really have bid everything up to insensible levels, leaving crypto dramatically undervalued and underappreciated. So what is working against crypto, like ETF outflows, could change dramatically if the January effect comes in and people go, you know what? The Fed's going to push a lot of money into the system. This makes Bitcoin at 80, 70 something feel extremely cheap. And it'll be even more amazing if something does happen next year and you really don't get a dramatic decline in Bitcoin beyond where it is right now. It'd be really funny. This is Toby's main thesis. I'm going to just give you this hint because we're about to hit the YouTube member podcast soon with some radical work that just came off the press. It'd be really funny if Bitcoin had, the only way Bitcoin could go down is if Bitcoin went up a lot first. And again, silver is an alternative form of money like Bitcoin that's going to get the banks in trouble. In many ways, it doesn't get any more bullish than that. It's just not on your screen this morning. Welcoming YouTube members, Zapatas, MJ Hits. Gentlemen, welcome. Will the pain ever end? Yes. The pain will end. Hopefully, I'm still propped up here at the microphone. They can't kill me. They can't kill the message about crypto. They just can't. It's not going to happen. It looks like the end of the world. Good. The more it looks like the end of the world, whether it's now, February, or whatever, the higher it's going. Even if it is an unbelievably volatile year, this whole idea that Bitcoin is a stable coin and, the ETF has normalized it and it just kind of hangs out. Yeah, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that. Not for 2026 anyway. You start putting $150 billion a month in QE. Yeah. And that's not even our forecast. That number's too low. The old number was 85 billion. You start seeing $100 billion or more a month in QE. You're going to see a different version of Bitcoin next year if you want a reason to be happy or excited when there seemingly is none. Hal Lopez up in the evening. Welcome, sir. Yav is here. Hello. Silver, $66. Zcash, $3.90. Still cheering for Zcash, man. Monero right now is I think Monero is holding up all altcoins. Monero is the altcoins. Okay. Buck 52,000 says, you're not getting me out. Cisco Wolf is here. GF, the Fuzz Crypto. Yoppy, welcome. T-Bone, a Spartan Colonel, correcting me, saying silver is now at 66. They can't get enough. Banks are caught. And the more banks are caught, as soon as the CFTC or somebody comes in to try and stop this, I don't know if they can. The government can always do whatever it wants. They can stop it if they want to. But if they have to stop it, what does that tell you about the banks? What does it tell you about the banks? And I'm not talking about the dinky banks. I'm talking about the big banks. Like the clearing banks are the big banks. JP Morgan, UBS, Hong Kong, Shanghai Bank, right? This is not small players. This could create a Lehman if it got out of control. Excuse the hyperbole. Okay. Richard Barry liked the cold weather thesis from yesterday. Dude, price per unit in Texas for electricity went to $200. You would have 3 adjustments in the Bitcoin mining world to get that whole thing back on track. So yeah, it's an absolutely perfect time for crypto to go down only and discourage everybody for reasons that people are just they can't see it. They don't think about it. I didn't think about it. But if you have mining problems here, then you have the Chinese and the Russians trying to pile on top of it. I don't know. It's their last gasp. They're going to be staring at, 6-figure Bitcoin and $3 trillion stablecoin market next year. Like, when have communists ever been right about anything ever? Literally ever. Moon Sector 7 is now a Spartan Colonel. Welcome, sir. Right? We have Andrew, the end to come. Good morning. Right? World of free speech, XRP. Save XRP from Solana. It's like literally, that's the new thing. Save XRP from Solana. Send the rescue chopper for XRP. It's so not fair if that's what's really happening, particularly since they're buying the XRP ETF. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy, right? Holy Sun is here. What's going on? Blown Ideas. Ricky Ricardo Films. Does XRP have more use cases than Bitcoin? Okay, well, XRP does have a lot of use cases. Okay, the question is anyone using them? They have stable coins. They have XRP Ledger. XRP is fast money. They have, a 1,000 person company behind the marketing structure for all these products. XRP has a huge retail cheering section. Bitcoin has got BlackRock and Michael Saylor. And a limited use case, except as collateral. One day, people will see the need for fast money. That's going to be next year. They can all sell. They can sell Zcash. They can sell Bitcoin. They can sell Dash. They can sell Decred. Litecoin even. Okay. Have fun. Because when the world discovers Bitcoin and baby Bitcoins, don't want to give too much away. Thoughts on the graph, right? Greetings from Italy. Also Aave. Okay, so if you look at most, like charts like the graph, the charts you can't even look at in most. You can, but they all look kind of destroyed. They're all sitting at their lows. Aave is going sideways, and I wish it wouldn't. It's like, it went down, and then it's doing this like grinding correction. Now, with this Solana lawsuit, to me, ETH DeFi becomes interesting again. It becomes very interesting. I mean, can you really run a major stablecoin platform on Solana right now until somebody figures out whether or not that lawsuit is real or not? I don't know. I don't want to take the Solana FUD too far. Maybe it's a giant nothing burger. Okay. I do know that, again, the indignity of altcoins, like I'm looking now at all altcoins on the screen, are down like 2, 3, 9%. And the Chinese domestic stock index last night was up 1%. So altcoins destroyed and Chinese altcoin stocks up 1.5%. Now, the only thing good about that is that means that they're printing too. Like their property market has a problem. They have to print. The Japanese can hike rates. Great. Wait until you see what happens right after they hike rates. They're going to come in and do massive QE. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. I just think it's flat out stupid for them to do it. But if they got to do it, great. They're immediately going to create a case for QE, just like the Fed did with quantitative tightening. It's like, yeah, let's keep quantitative tightening going for another 6 months, as the tariff phenomenon actually created tighter liquidity for them, something I learned a couple days ago. Too tight for too long equals what? QE. It's like a punish assignment. Oh, you guys screw up. The longer it takes for the Fed to cut rates 100 basis points, I know that sounds like a shill for the orange man, but it actually isn't. The longer it takes for them to cut rates 100 basis points, the more QE they're going to have to do. Whatever ninny nonsense the Bank of Japan is going to do, if they hike rates, they're going to have to do more QE. And you know what? If they don't hike rates, they're admitting that they can't hike rates, and QE is going to follow right behind that too. They're going to say, yeah, we'll do stimulus instead. So it doesn't matter. They can either make it much worse for themselves, or they can deal with the existing problem. In either case, everyone has to print. No one in legacy owns Bitcoin, and no one in crypto can hold on to altcoins, whether it's the baby Bitcoins or not. No one can hold on because it's down only, which, favors people who can DCA and wait until March. Right? I still think January is going to be very positive. Patreon has a very detailed trading plan around that. But giving up on crypto 3 months before the world changes does not feel like the right thing to do. Okay? Doesn't feel like the right thing to do. Oyo is here saying best XRP ETF. So I'm not familiar with that. Even if I was, I can't really give you investment advice. Bill, is the XRP 55 cents FUD or legit? Well, this is how I look at 55 cents. I would say that $2 is now the new 55 cents. In other words, XRP was at 55 cents literally for years. And I'm hoping XRP doesn't have to spend the next year at $2 because it spent this year at $2. It's the new frustration level for people in XRP. As if they need any more frustration. They have a Solana problem right now until the stablecoin market explodes. And it's going to explode because Uncle Sugar has to issue $9 trillion in debt next year. Just as sure as God made little apples. That's happening. So I know it all looks terrible and it's all down only now, but it won't be when they have to turn the printer on. Crypto Scam 1, Frank, what's going on? That is the market update for today. Don't forget to hit the like button on the way out.